Welcome back to another Chatting with Wisdom. I am Geegado Megwan, which is my spirit name for Talking Feather Woman. So, also known as Rollie Allaire, I empower women to stand on their truth so they feel fulfilled and can achieve all of their desires. This unscripted weekly interview series is to support successful women who feel misunderstood and disempowered in their personal relationships and allows them to stand in their truth so that they can communicate with confidence. Join me for a Stand in Your Truth call where we'll explore what's blocking you from communicating with confidence in your personal relationships. This week, I would like to introduce Phoebe Leona. Phoebe Leona is an international best-selling award-winning author, TEDx speaker, contemporary dancer, yoga teacher, entrepreneur, and embodiment guide leader. As the founder of the nOMad Collective and the co-founder of Tribe Military Yoga, Phoebe teaches the future leaders of our world how to lead with empathy and heart-centered heart-centered guides and healers, how to step into their power so that they can live in a world with a greater sense of belonging that is embodied and empowered. Phoebe is also passionate about sharing her own embodiment practice, Movement 109, to guide people to better understand how to handle the pressures of life and negate burnout, overwhelm, and get out of survival mode. You can listen to Phoebe on her podcast, nOMad, The Space in Between, and read her most recent book, Dear Radiant One, a story of emotional recovery and transformational guide. So today we're going to be talking about Our Body Knows, Unpack the Stories within to empower your life. So welcome. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me here again. I get 2 doses of you today.
Well, and it's twice in a row. So anybody who didn't catch that early morning is that Phoebe and I connected this morning in a 10-minute interview because she is one of our 22 speakers in our Women Inspiring Women conference, which is our 6th annual, and it's happening March 3rd to the 5th. So if you have not had a chance to go and have a listen, I invite you to go and check that out. So how has your day been in all this in the few hours since
And the
we've
space in
almost 12
between.
hours literally.
Yeah, the
So
space in between the time we've been together. Yeah, I've had a beautiful day because I get to do what I love to do. I get to lead people through my movement modality, Movement 109. So I have a training that's happening right now for facilitators. They're primarily healers or life coaches and yoga teachers that are learning how to integrate this somatic practice that I've created into their own modality. So I get to do that every day, and it's so fulfilling. I love it.
love it. I love that. And so we've been having some crazy weather. We are on a flash freeze warning with some snow coming tomorrow. So it
Oh,
should be quite interesting. But
okay.
other than that, so kids got to stay home from school today,
Okay.
anybody who was busing. So yeah, so that's been so as I shared with you just before we come on, my granddaughter's downstairs giggling and squealing. So hopefully that doesn't resonate upstairs.
Oh, good.
She's hanging out with her grandpa downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about how you've actually come into this practice. So, like, where did it come from? Like, where did you start?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So it's been a long journey. And I mentioned this morning about, my passion and love for dance. And I said, I was dancing before I walked. I would be in the jolly jumper before I was walking. And it's just been the language that it's just been a very intuitive language for my whole life. So there was no question in my mind that I was going to be a professional dancer. So that was always my track. I moved to New York City. I did that for a number of years. But what I found my way was it wasn't just being on stage. That's what I thought it was, but it was so much more. And during that journey of being a performer, I found my way to teaching Pilates and yoga as more first my own physical therapy of taking care of myself, being strong, being sure that I could be on the stage. But then I realized there's so much more depth to this. There was the personal development, there was the spiritual practice. And I really took that path of teaching yoga for last 20 years. And I retired from dance professionally, performing on stages, probably about 10 or 15 years ago. But it was still in my heart. I knew that it needed to be there. Somehow it was still going to be there. I just didn't know what it looked like. Yeah. And so I was on this track of teaching yoga. I was rather burnout because I was leading teacher trainings back to back, 200 and 300 hours, multiple a year. And I was not just burnout from the teaching of it, but also the physical movement of it, because yoga is so powerful as a healing modality and a transformational modality, but it's very linear. So you're on your yoga mat and you're moving, primarily forward and back in the sagittal plane. And it's a very masculine movement. And in the way that it's taught, you listen to a teacher and you do what you're told, like any sort of movement practice, right? And so when I was kind of going through this feeling burnout, I was lying on the floor and I was starting to move differently, which felt actually very familiar. Felt like when I used to dance in my bedroom. It felt like when I was in college and I was rolling around in the floor in our improv classes. And I thought, my body needs this. My body wants this. And I thought, what if everybody else needs this? Because it was very circular movement. It was very receptive movement. It was more in this energy state of the feminine, being receptive, listening, a deep listening. And so I went to a healer and I said, I have this thing that I've been doing and I don't know if it's anything. Can you help me? And she said, yes, this is definitely something. And she helped me codify it for about a season. She mentored me through this. And then I went to my students who had been my yoga students. And I said, is this anything? Can I share this with you? Is this anything? And they just felt like their heart got cracked open. They felt like, this is something that I've been waiting for, and they were already in the healing path and the transformational path in terms of yoga, because they were all my yoga teacher trainers. But there was something else that they were missing, that this was feeding it. And it was that deep listening. It was this circular movement, this very, like I said, feminine energy that allowed you to drop down and be more in the kind of like Eastern mindset, right? And so I just sort of followed the breadcrumbs along the way. So it's this whole groundwork practice where we travel through the chakras, through the subtle body, the energetic body. And we notice the patterns that going on through the body. And we notice also, like, how are we interacting with these patterns? Are we dancing with them? Are we forcing them? Are we denying them? And from there, there's this whole other series. I call it a whole ceremony where we dance and we feel liberated. And we can make new choices once we recognize these patterns. And there's a whole other element to it, but that's kind of bringing all of the things that I had done with the dancing, with the yoga, the Pilates. And when I was going on this journey of codifying it and teaching it to other people, I realized, oh my goodness, this has been what has been helping me get through my childhood trauma. Because to go back to my childhood, I was raised primarily by my father, who was a Vietnam vet and had very severe PTSD. He used drugs and had flashbacks and rage. And so it was very challenging to grow up with him. But what I did just intuitively was, when I felt his energy, because I'm very intuitive, when I felt his energy shift, I ran into my room, I closed the door, I turned the music on, and I danced. And I just thought that I was doing something that I loved. But what I realized once I started to share Movement 109 to people was, this was just what I was doing intuitively to heal myself, to release that traumatic experience. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
And that's really beautiful that you were able to, like, without even realizing or knowing that that's what you were doing, and then being able to correlate it together is really incredible. And so one of the things that we often talk about, and I think you and I had talked about when you and I had met before connecting on the podcast is that one of the things that and maybe it wasn't you, but I know it is a conversation that we, and you've probably had it with others as well, is that we carry all of this trauma in our body. So all the different things, and trauma can look differently for different people. And so I think that that's something really important for us to clarify as well. Like some people will say, yeah, but I didn't experience those kinds of things, or I didn't go through, like there wasn't any violence in my family, but there was lots of yelling, or there was lots of name calling, and there was lots, like those are all traumatic things that can happen to us, especially as a young child, or we may not experience things until we get older. And so all of us have experienced something that has caused us to be who we are from that standpoint of needing to protect ourselves in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a bully boss, or we've been bullied at school, or whatever. There's lots of things that kind of encompass that. And so for some people, it's some circumstances are more traumatic than others. So like you talked about your dad being a Vietnam War vet, and some people have different responses, or have different experiences as to what it is, or how they respond, or what it is that they're going through. And so, but a lot of times it's carried in our body, right? So like not a lot of times, it is carried in our body. Like it positions itself in our body somewhere. And so I know that when I do some of that spiritual connection to myself, it's and I think about, okay, well, where am I feeling that? So I'm feeling really stressed about something, or I'm feeling really anxious about something, or I'm feeling really happy about something. And so where in my body is that, and where do I need to focus that energy? So sometimes it can be that we're having backaches, and so that's a lot of times connected to financial stress, or we may be having pain in our neck and shoulders. Well, we're carrying a lot of burden on our shoulders and things like that, right? So so all these different things in terms of those things. And so is that something that you kind of find when you are working with your clients, with yourself, when you're using these embodiment practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, well, a couple of things. You said so many beautiful nuggets of wisdom. So yes, when we experience trauma, we all experience it in a different way. It can be different triggers. It can also be different responses in our body. And really what we do in this practice is regulate the nervous system, because whatever it is that you experience, it's taking you into that fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. And so some people, when they get that trigger, they might go into a reactive state where they feel anxious, or they need to move around, and they have anger or whatever. So they're going this more of a hyper arousal state. Yeah. But then there's also people, when they're triggered, they feel depressed, they need to sleep, they withdraw socially, and they're more in this hypoarousal state. And so you can see things on the macro level of how you're interacting with your life. But then what we really look at first in the practice is how you deal with it on a micro level in your body. So what you were speaking to of, the shoulders, the back. And what I've found is that, there's a beautiful book, and you probably know about it, Louise Hay, is You Can Heal Your Body. And it has basically a little dictionary of every body part and what it, kind of coding it. But what I've taken that, but I also have seen that it's really not just where it is in the body, but how the person is relating to that experience, whether it is a sensation you would call pain, or whether it is a sensation you feel like stress or another emotion. And it's really what I do is when we sit together in that one-on-one experience is say, okay, what sensation are you feeling? And instead of labeling it as pleasurable or painful, get really descriptive with it. What's the vibration of it? Is there a temperature to it? Is there a sound? How do you feel about it? Like, are you agitated that it's there? Are you just like, it's there and I'm just ignoring it? It's all about how you're interacting with the sensation in the experience of your body, because that's usually a sign of how you're doing something in relationship to your life, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. So these messages that we're receiving in the body are messages of wisdom. They're not there to annoy you. They just want to be seen and heard and felt for you to explore a deeper version of yourself and perhaps transform something on that external world.
I love that. I love that part of it is like being able to like when you were talking about like feeling and sensing, and so like I'm like, so as you're talking I'm like visualizing that, like looking for colors or looking for taste or looking for like all these different things that are connected, and it's like, oh, okay, that's like really,
Mhm.
really interesting. So because I would have never thought of it from that perspective of like really diving in. So I often use when I'm working with clients and somebody says something about, oh, well, my ankle hurts. So we oftentimes go and pull out the Louise Hay book and
Mhm.
figure out like what is it that's going on with your ankle hurting, or same as like when I had broken my leg. It was like, okay, so what's, and it wasn't just me, it was like clients were like, okay, so what does that mean, like, so pulling up
Mhm.
like, yes, it broke my leg, and right, so like, but there's all these things that are kind of universal that are happening to us, and so when we actually look at what it is that's happening around us, what's going on, how we're actually connecting to our bodies makes a huge difference in terms of like how does that impact us,
Yeah.
and being able to add music and vibration. And so what was really funny is that I had been, it has been a chaotic day. And so it's like, okay, so I'm at my desk and I've got a couple of things that I have to be doing. So while I'm sending off an email, just before we come on, that was one of the things that I did was I cranked up the tunes and I had like the whole house vibrating. My husband comes upstairs and he's
Good.
like, and then he kind of like peeks into my office, and then but I was like just dancing and typing my thing, but I could see him from the corner of my eye. And then when I
Yeah.
like stopped because I had to finish my thought, I looked over and I could see him going downstairs, and he's like, he's probably shaking his head all the way down the stairs. And I'm like, yep, nope, I've got the music vibrating because like I just needed
Good.
to just kind of
Yes.
let it go. I still needed to sit at my desk, but I needed to
Yeah.
just kind of like um de-stress all the things.
Mhm.
And so and I don't do that as often as I probably would like to, because
Mhm.
I try not to disturb the whole household. But at times it's like, no, I don't care. Cranking up the tunes for a few minutes. If Phoebe
Same.
happens to come on right now, she's going to hear my music blaring, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I'll
So
join in. And I'll join in. Yeah.
right, so but like it's just really important. And like I said, I never put those two things together in terms of
Yeah.
those like being able to like vibrate it out. Like I do chakra dance, so I'm a chakra
Mhm.
dance facilitator, so like I know that importance of being able to dance through your chakras, but like not kind of honing in to that, like where is it in my body,
Mhm.
and what does it feel like, what does it sound like, what is it, so like other
Yeah.
than describing it as pain or tension or stress or anything like that, but like what kind of like really kind of diving in deep the way that you described it.
Yeah, something that my teacher told me years ago was when she gifted me this beautiful meditation, and when she was teaching it to me, um, that I started to use words like painful, and she said, Phoebe, when you use this word like pain, whether you know it or not, unconsciously, you're carrying the story of that trauma. So when you start to just pull the little threads out and get really descriptive with it, you're untying yourself from that old story of what caused the pain. And I also want to speak to, what we were talking earlier about trauma is sometimes we don't even realize that we're experiencing trauma from in generational trauma or a collective trauma, especially if you're a very, very sensitive being, right? You could actually be experiencing some trauma from your mother's lineage, right? Or even your father's lineage. Um, so that's also when we do this work, we don't necessarily need to know the why. Like, why is my lower back hurting? Oh, it's because I'm having money issues or whatever it is. It's really just getting into that, looking at it and giving it that awareness, because you might not ever get to know the why. And sometimes the why becomes a distraction and it becomes more of an agitation than actually just witnessing it, right? It just wants to be seen and heard and felt.
Yeah. So I love that. And like, because it really does make that difference, right? So being able to, and like the title of our chat today is unpacking those stories. So like really kind of, and I like how you talked about like kind of like loosening up the fibers, right? So like it's all in this like really tight ball. So like if you go to take your laundry out of your dryer and like everything's like all in a bundle, especially the sheets, right? So like you're then have to like
Yeah.
pull it apart in order to be able to like get it to where it needs to be. And so just really important for us to be able to do that with our own bodies. And so like that just gave me that visual of having like this ball of laundry that you have to like kind of peel apart in order for to be able to loosen things up so that you can get it to dry, or so that you can like spread it out wherever it needs to go, or that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about, if we're speaking specifically to trauma, what happens, well, a couple of things. So when we have that, when we have some sort of experience that is traumatic, right, in that moment, our body is releasing chemicals to have you fight or flight, right, like adrenaline and cortisol. And so when that body is flooded with chemicals, our body's receiving a lot of information to fight or flight or freeze. But if we don't actually release those chemicals, so when it's over, we need to have an experience. So if you think of dogs, have you ever seen dogs get in a fight? And then if you tear them apart, right, they're like just like two bars of fur, right? But then as soon as they're done, they go over and they pee on something. Now, I used to think about that like, oh, they're just claiming their space, like they're done and they want to pee on everything and claim their space. But what I learned was they're actually releasing the stress chemicals through their body, right? We sweat. That's one of the ways that we release them. But if we don't, and we've been conditioned over time just to not react to things that feel bad, right? Or to overreact if we're too joyful, if it's not an appropriate experience, we start to clamp down. And so when we start to clamp down in our fascia and our connective tissue, we're actually holding in these various chemicals, and it's becoming part of our blueprint. So in a lot of ways, what you were saying about the sheets, right? They're like these tied up things in our bodies, these memories in our bodies, and we haven't given them an actual expression. So putting on music and dancing around or doing something physical actually helps that process, or even going and urinating, right? Or letting yourself sweat helps us release those stress hormones.
And that's really interesting. And it's obviously something that I know, because that's one of the things that I would often do, because I do um, I can't even think what it's called now, but like critical incident stress debriefing. And so that was one of the things, is that those are like as part of our like tools for people to be able to process. So like we would process the what, where, when, and how kind of thing, to be able to help that part of the story kind of unfold. And to be able to help the brain kind of make sense of what it is that was going on. But then it's always like making sure that you're drinking lots of water, staying away from alcohol, going for walks, doing some physical activity. If you work out at the gym, go and do some extra things at the gym to really kind of release it. So it's stuff that I already knew, but I didn't think of it in that same perspective. And so same as I had a Reiki master who, when she was teaching us a different program or whatever, and like she had a workshop, and that was one of the things that she talked about, is there was one particular person, as we were going through, this one particular person kept having to get up and go to the washroom, and so it was like, okay, so she's releasing whatever it is that we're in, whether it was collectively picking up and releasing from everybody collectively, or if it was just her own process of the work that we were doing during that workshop. And so again, it's like talking, like when you said the dogs, that was the very first thing that came to mind, is like that my Reiki master teacher that had said specifically, oh, that person's going to release. And it's like, oh, okay, so there it is again. The dogs are doing it too, right? So like just really cool that like, and it's like from one one species to the next, right? So like it's not just humans, the animals are doing the same thing, and being able to do that. So like if you get a frog, they're always like, be careful so that it doesn't pee on your hand, right? Because they do, when they get scared, they pee. And so then it's like, if the frog pees, then make sure that you wash. But again, it would be that those cortisol levels or whatever hormone that needs to be released. And it's like, oh yeah, it all makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, animals are naturally doing it to protect themselves, we do it too, but we're conditioned not to, right? Think about so many times when we were little where there were times like your grandchild is downstairs having so much fun, but grandpa could have told her, don't do that, right? Your grandma's upstairs and talking, and she'd have to clamp down on that joy. So it goes both ways too. We clamp down on those times of those temper tantrums when it wasn't appropriate to be in those situations. And also we could have been conditioned to not even have that positive emotion. And so we sit in, schools in desks, for hours at a time, and you can't go to the restroom because you have to take this test or whatever. There's been so much physical conditioning. We talked about, a lot recently about the mind conditioning and shifting our mindset and neuroplasticity. And this is really kind of neuroplasticity for the mind, for the body, right? The somatic repatterning of the body, of letting it release when it needs to release, letting it express these emotions, and knowing that they all belong. There's no bad emotion.
Yeah.
Right. There might be a bad way of expressing it in an unhealthy way, but really anger is necessary. Fear is necessary. These are things that keep you in survive, to survive and to transform and change.
And that is really important. And those are really key things for us to be able to remember, is that we have these different things that are going on, and being able to own it. And so like a lot of times when I'm working with clients, and one of the things that I will often say is, okay, like just feel that emotion. We will just sit here with you, and we will just hold space for you for this moment, and like, don't rush through it. Just allow yourself to be able to feel whatever emotion, because we get and we've been conditioned, a lot of us have been conditioned to not feel the emotions, right? So like I know that the growing up, it's like, stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about, right? So and that's one of the things is that and I know that with my kids and with the kids that are around now, is like I always make sure that to allow them to be able to, like, if you're crying, then cry. Like if you need to cry, then cry. And so at no point do we tell them to stop. It's like, okay, you need to, like, whatever emotion is coming up, let's try and work through whatever it is that's happening, right? So really important for us to do that.
Absolutely. I think what's happening right now with so much knowledge that's coming through around trauma the last, I would say really this past 6 to 8 years, I feel like it's rapidly moving and coming more in the collective consciousness of this. And what we're doing is we're all making choices to acknowledge it as adults and saying, I'm not going to do this to the younger generation, right? And this is how we're healing the generations behind us. But we're also healing the generations in front of us too. I mean, I've done a lot of work on my own healing path when I was writing my book, where I had to, have hard conversations with my mother and my grandmother. And when I decided to hold myself accountable and go through this healing journey, I didn't ask them that they had to come with me. But as I was unfolding and sharing and expressing myself in a different way than I used to, I've seen them transform and change as well.
Yeah.
Which is really powerful to witness. And I'm honored to have been.
It really is. And I know that within our traditions, that's one of the things that they say, is that when you're healing yourself, you're healing 7 generations behind you and 7 generations forward. And so, and it really is, and as carrying that forward and being able to heal the intergenerational traumas that have happened, and not just in one culture, but in many cultures, and being able to carry those things forward. And so even you being able to heal through your own traumas, being able to, that would also help your dad with the traumas that he would. And so like, you're not carrying that forward into the next generation as well, right? Which a lot of times those things have happened, is that we've carried those traumas into different generations and different families. And so really important for us to be able to remember as well. So, so I love that. So is there anything else that you wanted to share before we head out?
Well, I just wanted to follow up with what you just shared about epigenetics, because we actually have the DNA codes of, we are actually have our own DNA codes when we're in our grandmother's womb, which is really powerful to knowledge, to really see what you were just saying, the generations 7 before and after. And so we have the power when we're doing our healing, we're changing our own DNA code and potentially like changing not just the nurturing part, but actually the nature part. We're changing our DNA codes, which is really cool.
That is really
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of, I could talk with you about it all day long, but yeah, I get excited about all of this.
Well, and it's so important for us to be able to do that. And so, for anybody who's catching this before March 3rd to the 5th, you definitely want to come and join in with Phoebe at our women's conference. But if you're catching this afterwards, or if you're catching this kind of in between, how do you have some different activities or different events that you have that you want to be able to share?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be at the conference. So definitely come if you're watching this before then. And then I have one-on-one work that I can work with people if they want to dive in deeper into understanding their own patterns. And we go through the somatic practice of Movement 109. We also have a number of beautiful events that happen under my company, the nOMad Collective, that you talked about earlier. We have a monthly free event where you can come and experience a Movement 109 ceremony. So there is a link that I know you're going to share. It's just the nomadcollective.org, and you can go to the events tab. And there's, it's always updated with what's the next live event. So at the time we're recording this, the next one will, I believe, March 11th. So it's a Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we take about, an hour and a half to go through a Movement 109 ceremony where we recognize these patterns, give expression to them, and celebrate them and release them if need be.
So, beautiful. And so I've shared this on Facebook, and the link is specifically on Facebook and YouTube. And so for anybody on LinkedIn, I will attempt to get it posted. It just doesn't do it while we're on StreamYard, so I will go back over. But if you're catching this through the podcast, then like Phoebe said, is if you go to her website, so wherever it is that you're watching this, her link for her website is definitely on the in the description. So definitely click on that link, and that will take you to her website, and then that will give you the opportunity to be able to go and find the events tab. So thank you so much for joining, and I loved being able to spend both the beginning of my day and the end of my day with you.
Agreed.
And so this is incredible. And like I said, so almost 12 hours later, we are connecting. And so I'm looking forward to being able to connect with you for the conference, but also looking forward to connecting with you again in future events and connections. So thanks again for joining, and for everyone else, that is Chatting with Wisdom, and we will be back next week with another Chatting with Wisdom with another incredible speaker. So talk to everybody soon, and bye for now.